My name is Adam, and I am not a chef. I am a person who cooks. I cook food for myself and my family here in our house. Cooking for a living, at least in a certain context, has become a much higher status occupation in recent years, and I think that's good in many ways. It's good when people who do laborious creative work are recognized as the gifted artisans that they are, and it's good when they're paid as such, so thumbs up to that. But the flip side is that now this thing that you and I and most normal people do as a basic component of domestic life has become not just a job, but a profession. And the card-carrying members of that guild often look upon us just cooking in our homes as though we are kind of practicing without a license. Nowhere is this toxic dynamic more evident than in the notion that all of us who cook must have knife skills. Certain ways of handling a knife are among the first things that a person learns in culinary school and/or the restaurant trade. And as a result, these techniques have become the shibboleth that trained chefs use to distinguish their exalted class from the rest of us. Every group of self-important people has something like this. In the journalism world that I came from, those of us who've paid our dues working at legacy news outlets recognize our fellow club members with obscure and mostly inconsequential points of style, like using an Associated Press style abbreviation for a US state as opposed to the postal abbreviation for that state, which is what most normies do. You use a postal abbreviation and we know that you're not a member of the club. How dare you try to gather and disseminate timely information of relevance to an audience, aka report the news. You're not in our priesthood. You're not even wearing the special robes. That's actually an unfair comparison because knife skills actually have a practical function in the professional kitchen. They're not purely symbolic or ceremonial. What I would challenge is the notion that what is good for the professional kitchen is necessarily good for the home kitchen. That's as absurd as saying what's good for a professional bodybuilder is good for a guy who's just trying to stay reasonably fit. Hi Jay, love you, miss you. Let me try to prove this to you with math. I think when most people talk about knife skills, they're really talking about one specific technique known as the claw. Most of us mere mortals stabilize the food with the pads of the fingers on the non-cutting hand. In culinary school, they teach you to tuck your fingertips up so that the worst you could do is shave a little skin off of your knuckles. It'd be really hard to cut into your fingertips doing this. At least that's the theory. In practice, does using the claw technique actually prevent injury? I don't know. I haven't been able to find any kind of scientific research on the subject. Certainly professional cooks say that it does, and I'm willing to accept the validity of their lived experience, as the kids say these days, as though there's any other kind of experience. But I don't think it necessarily follows that the claw is right for all of us. The claw is awkward. It always makes me feel like my hand is going to cramp up. The claw takes practice. It feels very unstable to me, especially when I get down to the end of whatever I'm cutting. I have no doubt that I could master this technique if I put in the time and energy, but I simply see no reason to when there is a much simpler, much more natural, and I suspect just as effective technique of keeping my fingertips safe that I will call the walk, don't run technique. When you walk, your weight is always on the ground, distributed across your whole foot. When you run, you actually leave the ground with every step. You generally kind of bounce off the ground from your forefoot. The claw is great for what I would call doing a running chop, when the knife is almost kind of bouncing off of the cutting board and it never stops moving up and down. It's like a piston. If you watch my cooking videos, you could be forgiven for believing that I cut with a running chop. But watch when I play this footage back at the original speed. See, I'm walking, not running. The knife stops moving at the bottom of every single chop. I bring it back up again, reset, and cut. That is a walk, don't run cut. Now, I like to use fast motion shots in cooking videos for two reasons. One, I like to show you every single action that is necessary to prepare a meal. I hate cooking shows where some prepared ingredients come out of nowhere, like this Marco Pierre white fish stew video.
Chunky fish stew, Mediterranean style. Very easy, very simple, very quick. 10-15 minutes. This is a one-pan dish.
All sounds reasonable until he's finished the dish and then he scatters on some perfectly julienned vegetables. Where did those come from? And did you include the work of cutting those into your 10 to 15 minute time estimate? Oh, and they're blanched too. That means they were boiled in water for a minute and then usually shocked in an ice water bath. He needed a pot to do that, so it's not really a one-pot dish, now is it, Marco? I think that kind of cooking show gives you an unrealistic notion of how much time and work you're signing up for. I don't think you want to watch me cooking in real time, so I use fast motion to quickly show you every single thing you'll need to do if you want to make what I'm making. The other reason I use fast motion is that I think it's incredibly satisfying to watch something, anything, being made very, very fast. But I feel bad that in the process I might have given a lot of people the impression that they too need to be mowing through things the way that Marco does. Hell, even Marco says,
You don't have to turn them into matchsticks like I do. I'm quite competent with a knife, so it's easy for me. But if your knife skills aren't that great, just chop.
Just chop! Just chop your food into smaller pieces however you can, however feels comfortable and safe to you. I think the key is just to take it slow. I mean, when you're taking a blade to your body, do you feel compelled to blast through the job like you've got 100 other guys waiting in barber chairs for their shave? No, you take it slow because a sharp razor is a thing to be respected, like one from Harry's, the sponsor of this video. I've been shaving with Harry's for years because most other razor brands are kind of cheesy and stupid expensive. Harry's founders Jeff and Andy were also sick of overpaying for over-designed razors, so they bought their razor factory in Germany, and now you can get these scary sharp blades for only $2 a refill, delivered straight to your door. This is the new travel kit that Harry's sent me. This will replace my standard travel toiletry kit consisting of a plastic bag. I'm so classy. You get travel-size shave gel, post-shave balm, body wash, all in quantities that are small enough for airport security. I always like the sense of Harry's products. They strike me as adult and not trashy. You also get this typically gorgeous Harry's weighted handle. You can get $5 off your Harry's kit at harrys.com/AdamR. You'll be doing us both a favor. That link is in the description. $5 off. Thank you, Harry's. As I said, when wielding a blade, I think working slow will keep you out of most trouble. And here's another analogy from the exercise world, the deadlift. That most gloriously troglodytic exercise of lifting something very heavy off the ground and putting it back down again. The dead in deadlift means you're supposed to start each repetition of the lift from a dead stop. The weight is entirely on the floor, no longer supported at all by your body at the bottom of each rep. That's as opposed to kind of bouncing it off the floor like this. You're never really fully putting it down here. There are many reasons to start the deadlift from a dead stop, but one of them is to reset your form. Get your chest out and your back straight and rigid before every single pull. If you don't do that, you start to look like Drake. His back is all rounded and he's exposing himself to the possibility of grievous spinal injury, which is why everyone made fun of him for this. Just like a deadlift, I reset my form every chop when I'm cutting food. If I became distracted, if a child suddenly came barreling into the kitchen or something, I don't think I would slip and cut myself because I'm re-establishing my concentration on every single stroke. Nothing is on autopilot here. If I got distracted, I think I would just naturally stop. There is, of course, a reason that professional chefs tend to use the claw and a running chop instead of doing what I do. What I do is super slow, but I only have one onion to cut up. They have to get through a 50-pound bag of onions. And here comes the math part. This half of an onion I chopped up in 35 seconds. That's by walking. This half I chopped up in 15 seconds by running. That means that I can save myself a grand total of 40 seconds on my day by using a running chop on the whole onion that I need for my dinner. Big deal. But if I were chopping 100 onions for a restaurant, 40 seconds an onion adds up to more than an hour saved. That actually is a big deal. Professionals need to cut quick. I don't, and you probably don't either. It's rather like driving. I drive like a grandpa, and I am proud of it because I understand math. A whole bunch of people in my neighborhood make the same basic 8-mile drive as I do every morning when I take my kid to school. It takes me about 20 minutes, which means I'm averaging 24 miles per hour, which is not bad for city traffic. And I see all these a-holes around me doing psycho demolition derby Olympics just so that they can get to the red light and start waiting a few seconds before I do. And for what? Let's say very generously that their average city traffic speed is 30 miles per hour instead of my 24. They've saved a whopping 4 minutes on their drive. Wow! Whatever will you do with all of your spare time? That's assuming that you made it there alive. You didn't crash and die. In contrast, if you're a long-haul trucker doing a 1,000-mile route, pushing your average highway speed from, say, 60 to 70, that's going to save you more than 2 hours, and that actually matters. It's all about scale, people. If you're doing anything remotely hazardous at a modest scale, just do it slowly. There's no point in doing it fast. Now, you might be wondering, well, Adam, do you have any evidence to back up the notion that cutting slowly with your fingers out is just as safe as cutting fast with your fingers in? No, I don't have any evidence, but neither do you. I have scoured the scientific literature for any quantitative research on accidental injuries involving kitchen knives, and there's basically nothing. There's lots of research about intentional knife injuries, stabbing, suicides, that makes sense to me. There's lots of research about repetitive stress injuries involving knives. That's of great relevance to the meatpacking industry, so that makes sense to me. But what I would think is a basic area of home and occupational safety is strangely under-researched. We don't know what kinds of cutting in the kitchen tend to make people hurt themselves. The best I can do is give you some sense of what kinds of foods tend to be associated with knife injuries in the kitchen. Here in the US, we have something called the National Electronic Injury Surveillance System. It's a public database online where you can see anonymized records of hospital emergency department visits filtered by what kind of consumer product may have been involved. So here's what I downloaded. Every single ER visit in the States from 2018 involving product code 0464. That's cutlery, knives. About 7,000 incidents from 2018, the most recent year available. Each of these has what they call a narrative attached to it. 33-year-old male was cutting limes with a knife and cut left thumb. Or 56-year-old female states she was making dinner when she became angry. You know what you did! I did a little analysis of these narratives and came up with this visualization. It's linked in the description. This shows the number of times that specific foods are mentioned in these narratives about knife injuries. Most often mentioned is the generic vegetables or veggies. Right under there is avocado. 151 mentions of avocados in these ER narratives. There actually are a couple of studies about avocado cutting injuries specifically, because there really has been a sudden epidemic of such injuries accompanying the sudden popularity of the avocado here in the States. After avocado, we have the generic meat, followed by potato, onion, chicken, apple, melon. I notice a little pattern here, lots of round, hard things. Look how high lemons and limes are on this list. From this data, I would guess, and this is just a guess, this is not definitive, this is not scientific, this is my guess. I would guess that what this tells us is that cutting round things is one of the most dangerous things that we can do, things that can roll. And therefore, hopefully we can protect ourselves by making round things flat before we do anything else to them, which is a standard technique of knife skills. But again, that's just a guess, and it's one that the scientist I consulted on this cautioned me against making too hastily. Thanks, by the way, to Dr. Wendy Shields at the Johns Hopkins Center for Injury Research and Policy who checked my work on all this. Now, if you're a public health researcher or graduate student, I think there's a great opportunity here to do some needed work in this area. But in the meantime, with nothing but my own common sense to go by, I will continue to do a nice, slow, walking chop with my fingertips straight out, because that helps me hold the food more stably. And you do you. Get your food into smaller pieces however feels right to you. Just don't let some chef bully you into thinking you're not a real cook because you can't go Speed kills. Arrive alive.